This call is being recorded.
And welcome to First Bite, our Detroit Lions offseason preview podcast, where we are starting to talk about the Detroit Lions offseason, their GM search, their head coaching search. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I am the host of First Bite and managing editor of Pride of Detroit. With me, as always, is my co-host Ryan Matthews at Ryan_POD. Ryan, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. You're definitely both of those things, Jeremy. I wasn't sure if you were unsure of whether or not you're both of those things, but you 100% both of those things, my man.
You know, we're recording on a Friday. I'm thinking about the weekend. I'm thinking about maybe a day off, so I'm not in business mode here. But we got to get to business mode here because on these preview podcasts, we've been talking about the head coaching search. We've talked about a couple head coaching candidates, but the GM search is really heating up for the Lions. They've got a couple interviews already in the bag. They got one coming up that I want to talk about tonight, and that is of former Houston Texans GM Rick Smith. And so we've got a very special guest with us today to break down, tell us all about him. Aaron Wilson at Aaron Wilson _NFL, the beat writer for the Houston Chronicle. Aaron, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, guys. How are you?
Great. I want to jump right into this. Chris Spielman talked this week, and he talked a lot about the culture and building the culture in the line. So I want to know just, who is Rick Smith as a person? If he's trying to build a culture, what kind of culture is that? Who is he, kind of an authoritarian type? Is he more of a caring type? From your time working with him or aside him, how would you describe him as a person?
Right. Yeah, just to make it clear, I covered Rick as a beat writer for a couple of seasons, and Rick was pretty firmly established as the general manager. He had been in the position. He had a total of 13 years as general manager.
Yeah.
And he started off with Gary Kubiak, and then I covered him in the Bill O'Brien era. And then, I got to know Rick, not as well as I would say like John McClain, who'd known him, since the early days of the franchise. But, yeah, I got to know Rick, and I think Rick did a lot of good things, including especially Deshaun Watson and drafting J.J. Watt and DeAndre Hopkins. He's an accomplished executive. He, I would say, is the strongest at drafting and not missing on high draft picks. That's the big thing for him. He would get that right, and he would have excellent information. He was good at working trades, and he was somewhat creative when they made a mistake, like with Brock Osweiler and a salary dump and getting out of the contract and moving on from him so that they don't have a long-term cap charge. They typically had good salary cap management with Rick. His management style is inclusive in the sense that he will listen a lot to scouts and coaches. He tended to get Bill O'Brien the players that Bill – I wasn't here with him with Gary Kubiak, but, they would have success finding someone. There was a scout named Mike Martin that identified Arian Foster as an undrafted free agent coming out of Tennessee. And he made sure that Mike got credit for that signing, and he supported that. And then as Arian developed from the practice squad to becoming a Pro Bowl running back, Rick always made sure everyone knew that Mike Martin, was the primary reason that he was on the roster. And I think that builds a lot of loyalty when you do that. I still have guys to this day that will talk about things Rick did, the way he would run the draft room, the conversations they would have. And, yeah, I've never had anyone say, well, he's a bad boss or, he was difficult to work for. I think like everyone, they have their good days and bad days. But, yeah, he was a well-liked, popular executive. He was pretty active in the community. He had a very difficult time personally when his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and then she passed about a little over a year ago. And, it was a thing that for Rick, he took a leave of absence, but it was a little more complicated than that. There was a conflict with Bill and a power struggle, and Bill won that fight. And I think that he may have would have stepped away regardless because of his personal situation, but it wasn't entirely voluntary because of Bill O'Brien. And Bill was pushing hard. He wanted to have more personnel power. He took issue with some of Rick's decisions. And, well, now Bill is also out of a job after an 0-4 start. They fired him.
Right. Yeah. So, Aaron Ryan Matthews from Pride of Detroit. The thing that's interesting, because you kind of just put Rick Smith in a nutshell there for everybody. Kind of painted a pretty vivid picture of who he is. I would like to get into a little bit of the minutia. Some of the successes and failures. You mentioned he had in player acquisition. Some of the big hits that he had. J.J. Watt. Some of these other players. Was he kind of the driving force behind the Texans drafting Deshaun Watson?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if you saw an article I did last Sunday. It ran on a Saturday online, but I wrote I would say a couple thousand words, actually almost 3,000 words about that. And it described what went on in the draft room, what went on the day of the draft, some of the preliminary things that Rick did. Rick had a really strong conviction that he should be the guy. He scouted the national championship game in person. He had spent a lot of time. He worked on everything, though. He didn't do what the Bears did, where they zeroed in on Mitchell Trubisky. His process was to look at all of the quarterbacks. And so I was at the airport when Deshaun flew into town for his visit. And me and one other reporter, we met Deshaun when he was arriving at George Bush Airport. And he was going to head over to NRG Stadium. He's waiting to get his bags and then go to the car. No, he just chatted with us briefly. And it was a really important meeting. That they put him on the whiteboard. They had a good interaction with him. He talked football with Bill O'Brien and the other coaches. Patrick Mahomes had just left. And I talked to Patrick Mahomes that night about how did your visit go? What was it like talking ball with the Texans? He's obviously a guy from Tyler, Texas. So he was very interested in the Texans. And they did the same thing with Trubisky. They did a very, fair, extensive process, but they preferred Watson. And they moved to get him. And he asked for a show of hands, and only a few people put their hands up. And he said, well, I'm making an executive decision. I'm making this call right now. We're going to trade for him. And everybody good? And Bill O'Brien was like, yeah, let's do it. He wasn't as enthusiastic. He didn't have the same vision and passion for him that Rick did. Obviously, he got on board, and he didn't have a big problem with it. But that's it. I just would say the enthusiasm that if you even look back at photos from that day, you'll see what Rick looks like as they're making the trade, and Bill looks kind of lukewarm. But that said, I think what you look at, that's his biggest masterstroke move. J.J. Watt, drafting a future Hall of Fame defensive end was good too. In that instance, Patrick Peterson was gone, and I was told, would have been the pick. Wade Phillips advocated very strongly that getting J.J. Watt would be like getting a Randy White type of style player, someone that could rush the passer, stuff the run, and Wade had a really strong conviction. But, I would say listening to a really smart defensive coach like Wade Phillips, and, not using only that to make your decision, but listening to that opinion while you're on the clock, those are all good signs. Where he would have a hole in his game would be drafting in the third round. They missed on a lot of guys. It's a collection of names. That was kind of so many people would harp on about that. And, his late rounder, wasn't as good. But when it came to drafting, and not just drafting high in the first round, like, DeAndre Hopkins, a lot of people don't realize this, he was picked in the 20s. And so to get him at that spot, that's good. He missed on some free agents. I think Ed Reed, he didn't have enough information on that about Ed's health. Mm-hmm. And Ed was the Ravens. I was covering the Ravens, and Ed was washed up. Ed did nothing left. He'd had hip surgery, and it was a really bad decision. And that one backfired on him. But like all of them, they all miss on people. I would say he had a lot more hits than misses. He was a successful executive, and that's why now that he's been through the grieving process, he's been spending time with his family, he's been doing yoga, he's been meditating, he's been reflecting and getting ready for this. He did a little bit of television, You guys probably saw on NFL Live last year with his friend Adam Schefter. He's very close to Adam. Adam attended the funeral when Tiffany, his wife, had passed, Rick's wife. And yeah, I think Rick's, I've talked to a lot of friends of Rick. I haven't talked to Rick in a while, but yeah, I would say everything I've heard is Rick's in a very good place as a dad, as a guy that's a widow, and ready for the next step. And I don't even know if Detroit is necessarily his first choice. I think Atlanta is something he's very interested in. They're very interested in him. It could wind up being a competitive situation, but for Detroit, honestly, the information I've had is that Thomas Dimitroff has a very good chance to get an offer from them. But they're going to go through a fair process, right. The family, and look at everything. But yeah, I've heard there's a lot of enthusiasm for Dimitroff.
Interesting. One last thing before we let you go here. It does sound like Rick Smith is a guy who has, a solid reputation there still in Houston, despite kind of the ruffling of feathers there with Bill O'Brien. In terms of his, a
lot of people don't get along with Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point.
Bill O'Brien is, I would say, Rick's people skills and emotional intelligence and ability to have lasting friendships and good relationships where I'm able to call someone that works for another team that no longer works for him, might not go to work for him, just, because they're settled somewhere else. For them to speak that highly of him and spend a lot of time with a writer on the phone and, just speak on background about Rick and what he did, I would say that speaks volumes because that shows loyalty and also that people respect him.
Absolutely. The one question I want to have before we let you go here is just like, did you kind of grasp an overall philosophy he had while he was the general manager there in terms of whether it's the draft, free agency? Is it high character guys, guys with, high ceilings, low?
He cared a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
He did not like to bring in, if you look back, they did not have a lot of guys with major off-field problems. If you want to go through, you could see like DJ Swearinger, it wasn't like DJ was the worst behaved guy, where DJ had a few things happen here, a few incidents, one with some car rims thing, and his dog bit Jadeveon Clowney, and Swearinger was a little out of control in the field, didn't want to play special teams. That was probably one of his worst draft picks. But yeah, the theme was he wanted fast guys, he wanted very athletic, and he was willing to sacrifice sometimes on, workout numbers if the player was special. Like a DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre wasn't a fast 40 guy, but he really had an understanding of what the player was. Or if you look at Dwayne Brown, who's the best offensive lineman they ever had, including Laramie Tunsil. Dwayne wasn't that tall, but he's really physical, and he had a nasty streak. So, I think if you look at all of, Rick's guys, he liked toughness. Guys like J.J. Watt, Brian Cushing, like hard-hitting football players. And he was willing sometimes to sacrifice some speed if the guy could just flat out play or, was a smart player. Like Jonathan Joseph, someone he signed to a big contract to leave the Bengals in free agency. That guy played a lot of games, started a long time, but he lasted a long time too. He's still playing even. But I think overall, he was a good GM. He was successful, and he had a long run. Most guys don't last that long.
All right, that's Aaron Wilson. Again, you can catch his stuff over at the Houston Chronicle and on Twitter at @AaronWilson_NFL. Before we go, is there anything you want to plug that Lions fans might be interested in?
Just if you want to read more about Rick, I recommend reading the article from last Sunday about one team's bad decision on Mitchell Trubisky and the Texans' good decision to maneuver to draft Deshaun Watson. I think it's instructive about Rick and his process.
Appreciate that. Okay, we will go check that out. When we come back, we're going to break down everything Aaron said and talk more about Rick Smith as a Lions general manager candidate. Stick with us. All right, Aaron, thank you so much. That was great. Appreciate your time.
Guys. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. All right, Twitch chat. Sorry we had to kind of hustle through that whole segment there. He only had about 10, 15 minutes there, so we wanted to make sure we could get him in and out real quick.
I think it was 10 to 12 minutes, right?
Yeah, and we win about 14, so appreciate him.
What a generous guy.
Sticking around a little bit. But yeah, we'll talk with you guys for about a couple of minutes here, and then we're gonna get into like the second half of that podcast, which will go up sometime soon, probably early next week, because we're shoving everything towards the end of the week. But yeah, that was a good kind of, like, I had like a list of 10 questions and he answered about 9 of them in his first answer.
I know. So like after you asked the initial question, I was like, let's talk about Deshaun Watson and that whole process. And then he was like, by the way, I wrote 3,000 words on it. And I was like, my bad. Sorry, I didn't see it. But I mean, before we jump into chat, I think one of the most interesting things he mentioned was the Thomas Dimitroff stuff, right?
Yeah,
like,
we're definitely going to mention that in the second segment a little bit. Yeah, that's something that I had not heard, that the Lions are obviously maybe more interested in Dimitroff than we've heard. I believe he's got a scheduled interview next week.
He does have a scheduled interview, right?
I have to check my own tracker that I made just to be sure. Yes, sometime next week he has a scheduled interview. It's funny, he also mentioned the John McClain, because we reached out to him too as well to get him on this podcast, and he emailed me this morning after we had already scheduled this podcast saying, yeah, I can help you guys out.
He's a legend. John McClain is, right? Like, I mean, he's been a beat writer for forever, right?
35 years, I think. Maybe 45. It's one of the two. I think it might be 45. It's crazy. But if you guys want more Rick Smith content, we can bring him up.
I know McClain like breaks stuff before like Schafter does.
Yeah,
like he's been known to have a lot of sources and stuff. But
his Twitter bio says Houston Chronicle for 45 years. Insane.
Goodness gracious.
Get him on here. More information, always better. Okay, maybe we'll do that.
So I mean,
I think we got to go Dimitroff next, though, right?
We do have to go Dimitroff next, most likely. But man, that means that he was probably covering the Houston Oilers, right?
Oh yeah, had to.
Yeah.
How do you beat Adam Schefter? Good question. When people say they're hearing things like he said he heard with Dimitroff and us being interested, where would they hear it from? Possibly agents. GMs have agents too. So they might be creating some buzz. No, not John McClain from Die Hard, everyone. I know we're all in a festive mood. And we got a little festive background here thanks to Uber Conference, by the way. Do I have an agent? I don't have an agent. You want to help me out there?
Hey.
What are you yelling at? Is that Goose?
Come here, Bubba. Come on.
You like Thomas Dimitroff, but feel like maybe he needs a year off? No? Maybe. Oh, look at! Can I get some gooses in the chat? If you're watching on Twitch, we need some goose emotes.
Look at this guy.
I can't even use my emotes. Unable to load emotes. What?
Use your goose emotes if you can, folks.
Yep.
Hi, Bubba.
There we go. LJ's got it.
Oh yeah.
How's he doing?
He's good. He's probably gonna spend the next couple days with me.
Nice.
So, no promise for the Sunday podcast, but potential.
Oh, and Katie found the secret pet goose command that was added a couple weeks ago, but no one tried it until now. Now Goose has been pet 2 times. Hey, and 100 bits from Katie with a little dog emote. Franker Z, I don't know who that is, but he's a good boy as well. Any other questions, chat, before we get into the second and last segment of this mini pod? We're just going to kind of wing it. We obviously didn't know exactly what he was going to say. So, would you guys prefer an up-and-comer or a front office vet? That's a good question.
Ooh, yeah, that is a good question. I think for me, I want somebody who has GM experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nice if you have a extensive resume filled with being a scout and these types of other things.
Directors of player personnel.
Yeah, I mean, I just think for this job particularly, just because of where the Lions are at, I think you want somebody who has done it before.
Yeah, I'm mostly there with you. I think Ed Dodds is a name that comes up a lot, and he's a guy that I'm like, I kind of dig it.
But he's basically he's like assistant to the general manager.
Yeah.
So like he basically like, you know.
And that's what I'm saying. Like I don't necessarily need the title of general manager, but like something adjacent, whether it's director of player personnel, assistant general manager, something that's close, would be preferable.
Like, I want somebody who isn't just like cramming film. Like I want somebody who knows how to like delegate. You know what I mean?
When like set up a war room, like set up a draft board, like all that stuff. I mean, I can't get Matt Millen out of my head. The dude did not know how to set up a draft war room at all, and it was just chaos in there. The one thing that I think Bob Quinn did well was like, I think the draft process hummed along pretty nicely, and I actually think he drafted okay. Like I don't think Bob Quinn's drafting was that bad. There's questions about maybe the value that he put on certain positions, but in terms of players, I thought he did an okay job, and I think draft day hummed along nicely. All the reports we got about the Matt Millen war room were freaking chaos. And so anytime I consider a guy that, you know, doesn't have general manager or assistant general manager or player personnel things like that's concerning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Brian Calhoun.
Yes. Brian Calhoun from the back of the room. All right, let's get back into this. We'll probably talk a little bit about this because we don't need to stick necessarily just to Rick Smith here. Yeah, give us a second. We'll jump right back into the podcast. And Uncle Indigo, I almost missed the resub. He's been subbed for 8 months now, 7 in a row. I don't know what happened in between that first and second month, though. But thank you for the sub, all the support you've given. Plenty of support to the channel since you've been here. So thank you for that. You blame me? Why are you blaming me? And we are back on First Bite, our preview podcast. We just talked to Aaron Wilson, the beat writer for the Houston Chronicle, about Lions GM candidate Rick Smith, the former general manager of the Houston Texans. A lot of interesting stuff there, Ryan. Is there one thing that he said that maybe stuck out to you, besides the Dimitroff stuff, which we'll get to in a minute, but what he said about Rick Smith that either was like, yeah, that's a guy I want, or maybe I don't know about him?
I don't think he said a single thing that made me wary of him in any sense. I mean, I'm trying to parse through all of the stuff he dropped because I even though he was only here briefly, I feel like Aaron Wilson painted, like I said, a pretty vivid picture of who Rick Smith is, not only as a general manager, but also kind of as a person a little bit, in terms of his interpersonal relationships. I have to say that the one thing that stuck out to me is the story that he told about Arian Foster, and giving credit to that scout who, you know, kind of thumped the table for him as an undrafted free agent coming out of Tennessee, and the type of goodwill that probably generates within an organization. It's almost, yes, it's a reward-based system, but at the same time, like, you deserve all the credit in the world if you're the guy who says, hey, I think Arian Foster can be our guy. Let's keep him on the practice squad. And then all of a sudden he develops into a Pro Bowl talent. So I think that's I think that was my biggest takeaway, I think, from what Aaron Wilson had to share about Rick Smith.
Yeah, and I think I came into the interview with 3 popular concerns that I'd read from, you know, other fans or even that I had my own. One is the feud with Bill O'Brien, and he basically kind of confirmed what I thought. It's probably Bill O'Brien's fault, probably being kind of an a-hole as he's painted to be. And I think I came away with this interview, you know, thinking, you know, no character issues at all. The guy sounds like, and if you read that Athletic piece on him after, you know, he had to step down from the Texans, you kind of got a sense this guy is actually a stand-up citizen. So that concern, gone. Second concern, Brock Osweiler. I mean, we have to talk about it. It was a huge flub, but it sounds like he managed it kind of okay. I mean, for as bad of a mistake as it was, he was only in Houston for a year, and they managed to pawn him off in kind of a creative way and really not get complete cap relief from it. It's something that they still kind of had to deal with because you're not going to just completely get rid of that. But, you know, they kind of erased it. And then, you know, when you come back and you draft Deshaun Watson, and I knew kind of the story he was telling, that he was the one pounding the table. I'm glad you asked it, though, so that other people could hear. I think that kind of erased all the bad will in terms of him not being able to find a quarterback for really, 8 years of his first 12 years there. And granted, he's dealing with a franchise that's still was in its infancy. And it's not easy to find a quarterback in this league.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, Jeremy. Like, I think that's where Lions fans are kind of a little bit spoiled in a sense. Like, Matthew Stafford has been around for so long. Franchise quarterbacks don't grow on trees. They're pretty difficult to find. And sometimes you end up in bed with Brock Osweiler. But I think what you said is one of the most interesting things is that Rick Smith was able to find some creative way to pawn him off on the Cleveland Browns. So, kudos to him. And kudos to Cleveland just being forever dumb.
Forever dumb. What was my third concern about him? I don't remember now. I was trying to think of that entire answer, but I guess the only other thing I can think of that I really, I guess free agency, and he kind of alluded to it a little bit. Like he's better at the draft. Free agency, there hasn't been a ton of hits, and so he whiffed on Ed Reed, as he mentioned. So maybe a slight concern there. I mean, you're not going to find a perfect candidate here, but I would say Rick Smith is probably solidly in my top 5, maybe even higher than that, just because I think the character's there. We heard all week Chris Spielman saying like this organization needs to have, one pride. They need to be from top to bottom. Communication needs to be key. They need to be able to work together. They need to be able to delegate. And I think that's what we also heard from the interview is Rick Smith can delegate well. He can trust his scouts to say Arian Foster is really good, or he can trust his scouts to say, who else did he say? J.J. Watt, right? Wasn't necessarily his idea. Right. Or even another UDFA, A.J. Bouye was another big hit in Houston. Yeah, and so I think I'd be totally fine. It's not necessarily a pick that would get me like jumping through the roof, or I'm super pumped about it. But at the same time, it's like, listen, the Lions just picked up a good person, a guy with a ton of experience, a guy who has gotten superstars to Detroit, and that's something the Lions really haven't been able to do since Matthew Stafford. I mean, they've gotten okay first round picks, but they don't have those blue chip players on the roster that they so desperately need. They don't have those franchise guys that stick around for years and years and years and years. So I think Rick Smith is a fine candidate, and we'll see how he does on his interview during the week of Christmas. We'll see. Yeah, and I think the one other thing I want to mention about Rick Smith is his just ability to, and this is something that Aaron Wilson mentioned, in his talk that we just had with him, kind of his drafting philosophy. Like, it was pretty refreshing to hear that he prioritizes things like speed. Yep. But that he also that he doesn't put a ton of stock into the numbers at the combine if the tape says something else. I know. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that no GM is going to come without warts, right? I mean, especially I think in the NFL, like and I know Rick Smith's situation is a little bit different because he did a really compassionate, empathetic thing to step away from his profession and to take care of his wife. But I mean, if there's a perfect GM candidate, there's a team that he's already attached to. You know what I mean? Right. Like, if there's a perfect GM candidate, he's already working for a team. So I think Rick Smith is maybe about as perfect a candidate that you can get that isn't currently a GM that used to be a GM. Yeah. And Chet's mentioning maybe the one big flaw in his resume outside of Osweiler is hiring Bill O'Brien in the first place. But you have to imagine he probably learned his lesson there, right? Like, if they were feuding as hard as it sounded like they were, I don't think he would risk another head coaching hiring on a guy like him. Well, hey, and for Lions fans, he's not going to go after somebody else from the Bill Belichick tree, so that should be music to your ears, right? That should really be a positive more than a negative. Yeah. All right, before we close things up, we have to talk about him just kind of slyly dropping in the knowledge that maybe the Lions have a very big interest in Thomas Dimitroff, the former Falcons general manager, just fired back in October. Ryan, I know he was high on your list. Why don't you just kind of go into, like, one, how excited him just saying those words made you, and two, why he's such a hot candidate for you? Yeah, I mean, he just has to be a hot candidate, right? Because he has, again, he has the experience, right? He's
He did it in Atlanta. He really built a team that, I mean, the likes of that offense that the Falcons had when Matt Ryan won his MVP. I mean, that's an all-time offense. I mean, that's a team that was a couple of plays away, and a Teflon Tom comeback away from winning a Super Bowl. So, I think that Thomas Dimitroff is right there in the same tier as a Rick Smith. So I think it's interesting that Aaron Wilson alluded that the Lions might be really high on Dimitroff, just because, again, it's an experienced guy. It's a guy who's been a general manager before, and it's a guy who's proven that, he's hit on a lot of players. So that's why I'm personally interested in Dimitroff. Even hiring a guy because Dan Quinn was his hire, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. And, say what you will about Dan Quinn, but he eventually put the right people in place. Kyle Shanahan was his offensive coordinator. I mean, he was running the defense, and Atlanta's defense was pretty good too. And I would be happy. Again, I think I kind of echo the same sentiments that you have about Rick Smith. Like, would I be jumping for joy, and would I be outside doing snow angels in this Michigan winter? Probably not, but I would be much more comfortable than if the Lions go with a guy who doesn't have the experience.
Yeah, I think part of the appeal for me with Dimitroff is just how extensive his resume is. I mean, you won't find a longer resume out of anyone. The guy has been scouting since 1992. Basically, general manager for 12 years of the Falcons, director of college scouting for the Patriots before that, and then before 2003, scouter with the Patriots, scouting with the Browns, scouting with the Lions, scouting with the Chiefs. The guy's been all over the place, which is also, I think, a big positive, kind of having that diversified roster resume, I should say, where you're not just in one place the entire time. But yeah, I mean, you look at the Falcons teams of the past 5-10 years, anytime they struggle, it's never been like, man, that team doesn't have any talent. It's just like, how is the coaching not getting things right now? Like, it felt like the Falcons had a big drop-off, not because of talent, but because Kyle Shanahan went to the 49ers. And defensively, they've kind of been up and down. And yeah, again, kind of not getting the right head coach, not choosing the right head coach there, and maybe fighting harder to keep Kyle Shanahan, maybe a big mistake. But, I mean, sometimes you just kind of have to let guys go. You can't keep around offensive coordinators as long as you want, and you aren't going to hit perfect on head coaching candidates either. So, Dimitroff is definitely a top 5 guy for me as well, and to see that the Lions are very interested in him is good news, I would say. Before we close out, is he your leader in the clubhouse right now? I mean, we can go over all the guys that the Lions have been tied to so far, and let's just focus on the external guys. We're recording this on Friday night, the night in which they already interviewed Louis Riddick. There's Rick Smith. There's Terry Fontenot, the Saints' current vice president, assistant general manager, pro personnel. Obviously, they can't interview him till the Saints' regular season is over. Scott Pioli is a guy who's scheduled to get an interview next week. I don't think he's probably necessarily high on a lot of people's list, and then Dimitroff as well. So, out of those names, the guys that at least have a certain amount of interest from the Lions, is there one that stands out to you?
Yeah, it's Terry Fontenot. And he was on my short list when I wrote about general manager candidates for the Lions. There were 3 guys: Ed Dodds, Terry Fontenot, and Adam Peters from San Francisco. Fontenot, the reason why he kind of checks the boxes for me is 16 seasons with the Saints organization, 6th season this year as director of pro scouting. He is technically, I mean, his official title is VP, assistant general manager, pro personnel. It seems like the Saints have just done a phenomenal job of keeping talent in New Orleans for such a long time. Yeah. And, I think that a guy like Fontenot would be a great hire if you're going to hire somebody who, doesn't have the general manager experience. And he's also, I mean, he's enlisted some interest around the league too. I mean, I know I think the Falcons were interested in him as well. I don't know if they scheduled an interview with him, or they're planning on scheduling an interview with him, because you alluded, until the season's over. So he's probably at the top of my personal list. if I'm the Lions and if I'm the brass that has kind of been assembled to lead this search, I have an inkling and a feeling, and it's not just because Aaron Wilson just dropped his name, but I feel like Dimitroff might be the leading candidate for the job.
Yeah. That's what I came away today's show with, is that he probably is. I do kind of think I like Rick Smith the most right now, actually. The more I think about it, is just the guy is taking a couple years off. He's settled in. He's ready to get back in there. He's hungry as hell. He obviously a very good person and a fairly good drafter. I got a lot of faith in a guy like that. I really think he's kind of got his head on straight, and as Aaron Wilson said, he's going to be a hot commodity. I think it might be tough to kind of pry him from Atlanta. It kind of sounds like, based on what he was saying, but if two people are fighting over a GM, that probably means he's got a pretty good reputation, and by all means, it sounds like he was well loved across the NFL. Part of that, the Athletic piece that was written about him in the aftermath after his wife passed away, was just how many people across the entire NFL went to that funeral. And so having those sort of connections is good in terms of being able to hire other people on your staff. It's good in terms of maybe being able to make moves as a general manager with trades and things like that. So a well-connected, well-respected guy is a guy I want in part of the Lions organization. So I think Rick Smith might be my guy right now.
Yeah, and I think something that we need to highlight about all of these guys is, and this is just something that might become a reality here in Detroit. I'm not going to tell Jeremy to kick rocks because of certain Matthew Stafford rumors, but I mean, this is an organization that might have to be preparing itself for life beyond Matthew Stafford. And a guy like Rick Smith pounded the table and drafted Deshaun Watson. Thomas Dimitroff's first draft pick for the Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan. And then if you look at Terry Fontenot, yes, sixth season of being director of pro personnel, he was a guy who took a shot on Teddy Bridgewater and, did his due diligence and got a guy who, I mean, now he's in Carolina and he's a starting quarterback. So that's something really important to keep in mind. I mean, the quarterback is the straw that stirs the drink for every NFL team. So that's probably my biggest quality that I'm looking for in terms of the minutia that you get into when it comes to, hiring a general manager, is can they hit on quarterbacks? And these guys definitely have a track record with it. Yeah, and the Lions might be in a position where they have to be a little aggressive too. And the fact that Rick Smith went up and grabbed the guy that he wanted is something that he might have to do in 2021, or if the Lions decide to wait a year, maybe 2022. So did the Chiefs when they moved up and got Patrick Mahomes, and so did the Bears when they moved up and got. Oh wait, why? All right, and I think with that note, that horrible note, let's not get Ryan Pace. I guess I think that's what we are all learning. If he becomes available, let's keep him available. Anyways, we will be back soon. Sunday. I don't know when we're dropping this on our podcast feed, so we'll keep doing these GM interviews, trying to get to know these candidates from the people that know them best, because that's really the best way to get to know them. And so thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next week with a new episode, with a new host, with a new guest, I should say. Not a new host. My job is not being taken as far as I know. And we'll talk about a new candidate. So until then, it's chaos. Be kind.
Call recording off.
All right. Sim tomorrow. Yes, chat. We will be doing the sim tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. As always, we'll be taking all of your Lions questions. We'll be watching the virtual Detroit Lions take on the virtual Tennessee Titans, since we didn't talk about that game at all during the week of the podcast, because I'm not sure how many people are all that interested in it. But there are obviously a lot of interesting storylines, like, will Matthew Stafford play?
Mm-hmm. Over or under 150 rushing yards for Derrick Henry.
Is that what the over-under is currently set at? Or are you setting it at? I mean,
that's what I'm setting it at. I'd be interested to see what it is. I mean, it's got to be it's got to be in the three digits, right? It has to be.
Oh, hey, Eric
For how
Schlitt.
bad the Lions' run defense is.
Eric Schlitz, the ever-optimist, is taking the over. So is LJ. And LJ also says, congrats, Ryan, and welcome back.
Thank you. I got engaged.
What was I about to say? I forgot. Dang it, I keep forgetting things. I don't do well at night.
Yeah, forget your third reason why you like Rick Smith.
Yep. Shoot. This week has been a whirlwind, man. There's been like I feel like I've been averaging like 9 articles a day. It's been nuts.
It's just every day. It's like here's another candidate that the Lions are interested in interviewing for their general manager job. It's a good thing, right? Like we're all on board with just team interview everybody.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Like that's a great strategy to me, especially now when like you have time to kind of spend right now because you're going to interview some candidates after the season is over. So why not use the time you got now to basically just touch bases with literally everybody you can?
Mm-hmm.
Tell you what, take next Thursday off. That's Christmas, right? And that's Christmas Eve. Look for you guys, lots to write about. That is true. This is normally the most miserable time of year as a Lions beat writer, and it hasn't. It's been kind of exciting. There's been a lot going on with not only future news, but like I said, Stafford being injured, Ragnow being the weirdest injury I've ever heard. Hopefully he's doing okay. Obviously not playing. In case you didn't hear the most recent news, downgraded to out.
And speaking of voices, the Lions having a new flagship radio station.
Right. Flagship radio station, Chris Spielman. Like, it was a busy ass week.
Yeah.
For a team that's out of the playoff race. Yeah, I don't know. Chet, you got anything else we want to talk about before we go? Now it's time to fix relations with Calvin. That was literally one of the first things I tweeted out once Spielman was hired. It's like you got to go for him now, right? Like Barry's in there too. Just be like, hey, come on now. I went through the same thing.
I think, and I didn't have a chance to be on the podcast where you, Jerry, and Mike all talked about the Spielman hire.
Yeah.
But my quick 2 cents on it is, and like you said, Jeremy, I think you hit my sentiment kind of on the head when you said that, if Sheila Ford Hamp, if her prerogative was to hire somebody that would be a fan favorite, like she did it, like with Chris Spielman. I mean, like if you've noticed, like every article that introduced Chris Spielman as the, or I shouldn't say every, but quite a few of them, like the lead photo was like Chris Spielman, like with a bloody nose, or Chris Spielman,
right,
like in his like Lions uniform in 1994 or whatever. So it was like, it's some real fan service. The way that any general manager could totally win over, the fan base instantly is if he makes amends or she makes amends with Calvin Johnson. Yeah. I think that would be like my first order of business.
Yeah, there is, I would say, and this is just a complete kind of pulling out of my behind guess, I would say there's like 30% of Lions fans that are on the Lions side, and so I don't think they get mad at it, but I don't think they care.
Be like indifferent about it, right?
Yeah,
like maybe they would push back on people being so excited about it, but at the same time, like that's something where, God damn, just take care of Calvin,
right? It can't be that hard.
It's so easy, but that's why it's such a shoe-in for like something for a new general manager to do, because it just makes too much sense and it will buy you too much goodwill just from the jump.
Right. Couple alerts to catch up on. Gabe, nice try with the follow. I'm not going to say your full name because I've seen that before. Nice try. I'm just going to call you Gabe though. Joshua asks, you like the idea of Louis Riddick? I'm trying to keep an open. I'm really trying to keep an open mind about Louis Riddick because I just see a guy that's been out of the NFL for forever, and I see a lot of people on Twitter in general in the last couple of days just like drag him for old draft takes, and I don't think that's honestly too fair because I mean, it's kind of a push and pull, right? Like, because I think a lot of people are attracted to him because they've seen him. They've seen him talk about the draft for the past 12 years or whatever it's been, and when you hear a guy talk, like you're like, okay, that guy sounds smart. You hear him talk and put someone on TV long enough, and he seems smart.
The Mike Mayock effect, right?
But it also kind of has the negative effect of if you're on TV all the time, eventually you're going to say something that makes you look like an idiot. And like
a John Gruden.
Yeah, right. I mean, and Mike, the whole Mike Mayock is both like, it's both an example and a counterexample. It feels like right now because obviously the Raiders have lost 4 out of the last 5 or whatever. But I don't know. I actually put out a tweet yesterday. It was just like, I know there are a ton of you that are excited about Louis Riddick. Please tell me why. I want in on that. And no one was that convincing, but the general sense I got was like they liked what he said. He's been at least somewhat involved in the NFL. It's not like he's just been, kicking it up beachside or anything like that. And he's got a decent amount of experience in the past. No general. And I think it was Schlitt who actually pointed this out. Like, a lot of people just assume he was a general manager before his time at ESPN, which was, it's not true. He wasn't. But I get that sense from people too. Like, they just thought he was a general manager. He never was.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of mad on the idea as well. But I'm going to try to keep an open mind if they go there. That was you. See, I knew it. What else? Do you think somebody maybe should have gotten a penalty for hitting Ragnow in the throat? Asked Patman. I watched every snap of that first quarter, and I did not see any egregious hands to the face or hands to the throat. And never, Ragnow never showed any sign of discomfort, at least from the all 22 or the broadcast angles. I didn't see it. It was super weird. I just got a cameo from Calvin from the wife as a Christmas present. That's amazing. I didn't know he was on Cameo. That's hilarious. That's great. Is Joe Burrow the next Stafford? Both were picked first overall and on bad franchises.
And also had to deal with injuries in their rookie season.
Yep, true. I don't know. I didn't get to watch a ton of Joe Burrow this year. Did you?
Just the bits and pieces when I was flipping over to Red Zone.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my digestion of other teams during the season is catching stuff on Red Zone. It isn't until after the season if I get a chance to watch other teams. But I mean, I know Justin Herbert's getting all the love.
Yeah.
And he's getting the big rub. And I guess Tua is to an extent just because his team is experiencing so much success. But
right.
I still think of those three guys, I still think Burrow is the dude.
Yeah.
He was doing the most with the least amount of talent, I think, around him. He didn't have a Keenan Allen.
True. And someone else mentions Herbert. And yeah, I was just going to say, I literally saw someone right before I jumped on here compare Herbert to Stafford. It was Peter Bukowski, Packers guy. I think we had him on the podcast a year ago, and people hated him because he was very confident about the Packers. But a good guy, and a funny guy, and a smart guy.
Herbert made some throws last night, though, where I was like, geez, that ball just shoots out of his arm. It was
the first 3.5 quarters of that game was good quarterback football. It was actually good, entertaining football. And then I don't know what happened the last 10 minutes of that game, and then overtime.
Chargers, it's almost like they took all of their Chargers energy and just put it into the game.
Yeah.
And they're everybody's gonna feel it. Even the Raiders are gonna feel it. 65-yard field goal attempt.
But I mean, we were on here because we were about to jump on the podcast that we thought we were gonna record last night, and we were watching, and I was saying I thought Mariota looked pretty damn good, and then I think literally 10 seconds after I said that, he threw an interception that almost lost him the game. But I was pretty impressed with him. I think. I don't know. I was going to say maybe he goes to the Bears or something, but he's under contract. I don't know. The Raiders quarterback situation is interesting because I think everyone had given up on Derek Carr before this year, kind of, except for the Raiders. And then he went out and had a pretty darn good year. Nearly took the Raiders to the playoffs, and now they're stuck with him and Mariota. And I don't know if stuck is the right word there, but maybe they just roll with both of them again.
You're forgetting who the third string quarterback is, who everybody on Twitter was super excited to see once Carr went out because they thought he was going to be the next in line.
Wait, who was it?
Nathan Peterman.
That's
baby.
right. That's
Todd
right.
Gruden's guy.
The
Everybody was
Peterman.
Peterman time. And they're actually, he's inactive for the game. And everybody's damn it.
Anything else, y'all?
Nah, I'm about to jump out of here too.
Y'all think Anthony Lynn gets fired? I actually like him. He just does weird things during the game. He has good game plans sometimes against good teams. I'm sorry. His late game management has lost them multiple games this year. That's unacceptable. You can be great at game planning, but if you are making horrible decisions in the fourth quarter, wasting timeouts, not being able to get your field goal team, or that was the Raiders, I think, that had the issue with the field goal team, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, his game management is just, it's absolutely horrible and unacceptable. So maybe just go back to being, what is he on the offensive side of the ball? I don't even know.
I don't know much about Anthony.
Go back to being a coordinator.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to end it there, guys. Tomorrow, 10:30 a.m., we'll be doing our Madden Sim. I'll be answering all of your questions. We can talk like this for a good 90 minutes or so. And then Sunday night after the game, we'll be doing our normal podcast. We'll probably do a quick post-game show if there's anything interesting to talk about. But other than that, we'll probably talk more GM stuff on the big podcast because I can't imagine there's going to be too many interesting things to talk about with the Titans game. So we'll maybe do 1 segment on the Titans and then a whole bunch of stuff after that. Defensive-minded coach. All right, there you go. But yeah, until then, I think we're gonna skip the raid tonight. So you guys just go on your merry way. If you want to go watch someone on Twitch, find someone. I don't got anyone for you. But until then, we'll see you soon.